Hey guys, just wanted to jump on here really quick. I've had a lot of people reach out to me in terms of how they can support what I'm doing. I am doing this full time now, and if you'd like to contribute, if you like and value the work that I'm doing and like to contribute, on every single episode, I have a title "Support My Work." Underneath it, there's a Venmo, Locals, Cash App, or if you prefer not to use one of those methods, you can mail a check or money order to PO Box 25383, Scottsdale, Arizona 85255 9998. So, again, thank you for all the support. Appreciate it and look forward to more conversations ahead. People, I just got a comment on my Apple podcast, and they were saying, so the comment was saying, well, Mikey just talks about the same thing with all of his you I'm like, okay, well, and you know, it's bullshit, pardon my language, Larry, about all this. When they can put comments, I can't respond. Well, when I'm
Right.
talking about Russia, Ukraine, or the Middle East, or the election, there's going to be a little bit of overlap, and there's going to be some of the same questions. I appreciate people listening, but your answer is going to be different than say somebody else. You know,
Sure.
like a Dave Collum or Tom Luongo. But I just think it's funny how I got criticized for asking like a lot of the same old questions. I don't know why this is bothering me and I'm bringing it up to you, but obviously it irked me because I read it right before I came on here.
I understand. I've been in the same position.
Yeah, and people and especially right now, this is not the time to rest because things are just. I mean, do you feel like they're accelerating with the insanity, or
Well, yeah, accelerating and with nobody really this is a car going downhill with nobody at the steering wheel,
so
at least
just
on our side.
just today, right before we came on, my intention was to talk to you about Russia, Ukraine, right, and everything that's going on there with the new missiles. But I mean, we can table that for a little bit. Netanyahu announces a ceasefire with Hezbollah today. What are your thoughts, Larry?
Well, it, Netanyahu announced that his cabinet has approved a ceasefire with Hezbollah. There's no news from Hezbollah saying they accept it or that they're signed on board. I think part of the impetus for this from Israel's standpoint is they've been taking a real beating trying to advance to the Litani River. Supposedly, one unit has made it to the Litani, but the point of this was to push Hezbollah north of the Litani River, which hasn't happened, to stop Hezbollah from firing rockets into northern and central Israel, which has not happened, to basically disarm and defeat Hezbollah, which has not happened. Uh, I do not endorse or embrace anything that Itamar Ben Gvir says, but he is arguing correctly that this is a sham, that it's not going to fix anything. This is being done more for political, cosmetic political purposes than achieving actually any substantive change on the ground. So we'll see. We'll see what happens with Hezbollah. What we do know is Israel has been committing a war crime a day, and it's bombing of civilian areas throughout Beirut, not only in Beirut, but throughout southern Lebanon and up into northern Lebanon. It's outrageous. It's as uh, it's on par with what the Nazis did in bombing civilian areas in Poland when they invaded. And people say, "Oh, you can't draw comparisons with the Zionists and the Nazis." I absolutely can and do. I see absolutely there they are. What Zionism is a curse on this earth. It's evil. It's a racist, vicious racist ideology.
Not if you ask some of the new members of Trump's cabinets, right? Those are the good guys,
Yeah,
Larry.
well, that's part of the problem. The entire premise of Zionism, particularly in the United States, rests upon the belief that the Torah, that the first five books of the Bible, were either the more conservative folks insist they're written by Moses. Now, anybody with a brain can look at that and realize it was not written by Moses. These were a variety of people. It came from first oral tradition, so it wasn't even written down starting with the beginning of, uh, you know, the beginning of the history of the Hebrews, because that's what this really was something that was compiled, they estimate, during the exile of Jews from Israel when they were overrun by the Persians. They were in what was known as the Babylonian captivity. And it was during that period that these, what we now know as the Torah, started to be assembled from oral tradition, but it was also written with a purpose to both explain and justify why the Jews deserved to control the land that they did control. And so, when you dig into the Torah and you start with Genesis, which I guess in Hebrew it's Bereshit, you run into some really odd things. Number one, Judaism is predicated upon being monotheistic. There is no God but God, which Islam is and Christianity adheres to. Except you get into both Genesis, the first chapter, and Genesis, the third chapter. And now I'm quoting where it says, "And God said, let us make man in our image." Excuse me? Who was God talking to? Let us is not something that you put in salad. Let us means you got somebody else you're talking to, and you're talking about a collaborative effort between at least two people or more. And then in Genesis 3, after, the story of Adam and Eve eating from the tree of knowledge of good and evil, tree of knowledge, you've got God saying, man has become like us. Again, thinking back to the Lone Ranger. Who is us, Kimosabe? So, you've got that. You get a particular type of God that's portrayed as a God, basically a blood sacrifice. And the earliest introduction of that is the story of Cain and Abel, where Cain is a farmer. Abel raises flocks and kills them for food. Who does God favor? Abel. Who does God reject? The farmer. Now, in America, with our lore about farmers, man, the old John Denver, life on the farm is kind of laid back. We go back to those days of John Denver singing. Farmers are great. Well, God hates farmers. The God of the Genesis hates farmers. Loves him, those hunters. So, that's where we get this first sort of thing. And God rejects, Cain kills Abel. And then they go through a whole lineage of Cain, and then it's like, sort of stops. And next thing you know, we get the lineage of a third son born to Seth. But then, again, the entire premise of this is that there were no human beings. God created the earth, Adam and Eve. So that means we're the product of incest. Because if Adam and Eve were the only human beings, they reproduced, had children, and then their children had to have sex with each other in order to have children. That's how this biology thing works. They didn't have the transgender thing going on back then. So all of a sudden, you got this entire premise of incest that is, it's there implicit. They don't describe it openly, but it's there. And then throughout the Old Testament, this concept of killing, that both God's supposedly perfect, and yet, starts complaining in like Genesis chapter 7 that, boy, these human beings are a bunch of terrible people. So I'm going to kill them all with the flood. I'm going to kill them all. In fact, I'll kill all the animals too. I, the perfect God, made an imperfect creation. Now, I'm belaboring all of this because it ultimately comes around to this God that was written about by these people who were captive of Persians in Babylonia, decide that God tells them that they're special and they have a covenant with God that nobody else has, And that covenant allows them to go in and kill the Amalek, kill the unbelievers. So my point is simply, all of you Christian Zionists out there that think that somehow the Old Testament is the holy word of God, I'd like to suggest it was written by men, just like Shakespeare wrote his plays, with a particular point of view, claiming to speak for a deity. But when you look at the actions of that deity, actions of that deity don't quite add up. It's a multiple personality. It's a deity of death. It's a deity that plays favorites. It's not a deity of universal love. At least it's not the kind of deity that's presented within Christian theology as far as what is the representation of God in the person of Jesus. So it's just that, you know, and why do I raise this? Because here you got Trump's an appointee to nomination for ambassador to Israel. Mike Huckabee is out there doing, you know, spinning all of this Christian Zionist nonsense as if it's the word of God, and it's not.
Well, what I think too, we, when I say we, you, I, and others, wanted to get to objectivity and truth. That was the whole point of it. Now, I'm
Right.
newer to the scene. You know, you've been doing this a lot longer, both on your professional experience and then what you're doing now. I mean, your public service with CIA and now with your writing and your interviews, podcasts. But
Right.
me, I don't have that type of professional background. I'm just a guy that asks a couple of open-ended questions and talk to you for an hour. But I wanted to be, I've always said not everybody that comes on here tells the truth, right? But objectivity and truth, and you make your own decision. But I think where I'm going with this is you've got certain people on the right side of media, quote unquote, that are swearing to get to the truth and objectivity, and they are just so pro one side with all this. And
Yeah.
it's just unbelievable. And I mean, Daily Wire. Daily Wire. They're so devoted to Israel, but I thought the whole point of all this was to be objective and get the truth out.
Yeah. Well, what's really sort of funny is when you look at a lot of the people who, and particularly on the Jewish side, who are Zionists, they don't even believe in the theological foundations of their faith. They give them that ostensibly grants them the rights to own this, to claim ownership of this land. So, like I said, it's all a fraud. It was manufactured starting in the late 19th century. Theodore Herzl. They were looking for a land where the Jews who were scattered, who had adopted, what we know is sort of, let's call it modern Judaism, not modern in the sense of 21st century, but the Judaism that developed once the temple was destroyed and Jews were exiled 70, 80, and after that, there developed this whole rabbinical tradition, and a lot of the practices that are recorded in the Talmud became sort of it defined Jewish life in Eastern Europe, in Russia, throughout Europe, and it is, it's taken on a life of its own. But central to it, if you really buy into it, is you've got to accept the religious dimension of it, where the most conservative rabbis insist that Moses wrote the first 5 books, the Torah. The rest of you've got the kings and the prophets. Those are the other sort of 2 elements of the Jewish Bible that the Christians recognize as the Old Testament. But again, it comes down to people exercising some common sense and just simply ask. So because some guys wrote a book in which they say, hey, we're forever entitled to this land, and then that book's handed down generation to generation, and those succeeding generations haven't lived in that land for 2,000 years, but they get to come back and kick everybody out and say, hey, this is ours, you go elsewhere, even though the people they're kicking out have actually lived there for the last 2,000 years or their ancestors. Yeah, it didn't make sense. But But the fact that we get educated adults believing in those kinds of fairy tales, and just, the fact that I'm calling it a fairy tale is going to get you a slew of hate mail, guarantee it. But I'm happy to sit down and debate this with anybody. The Old Testament's a joke. It's illogical. It doesn't make sense. It does not explain the diversity of humanity that populates this planet. And it's designed really to only tell the story about what makes and in fact, it's only a part of, the 12 tribes of Israel, Israel's 12 sons. They, 10 of them disappeared over the ensuing hundreds of years once they were invaded and absorbed by the Syrians. So you really wind up with 2 of the 12 tribes that these promises were essentially made to. And you can make the case, how do we know that those other 10 tribes aren't actually represented in Syria, in Iran, in Turkey? And that those people are just as entitled to that land as the small group that came out of Europe claimed to be. So and with all that said, it's leading us into the prospect of an actual world war, because Israel's going to, they're hoping to use this pause in the battle with Hezbollah as a reason to go after Iran. And Iran, for its part, has vowed it's going to retaliate against Israel. So, they've been saying that for weeks, haven't done it. I come from the school, don't make idle threats. If you're going to do something, keep it to yourself. Do it. Let your words speak for you instead of your mouth.
You're talking about Iran at this point?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Because they've been saying it feels like longer than that. It's always coming. It's always coming. It's always coming.
Yeah. And maybe they'll do it. I don't know.
What would be the reason for Israel to accept a ceasefire right now? And before you answer that, my thought is, are they waiting for Donald Trump to get back in, and it also gives them an opportunity to recalibrate and restock their cash?
No, they're suffering terrible losses in Lebanon. They're losing. They've lost probably more than 100 tanks now. They've soldiers being killed and wounded. They simply can't stand the pain. And the army, this is what Yoav Gallant, Bibi Netanyahu's co-conspirator, had warned him about, that going into southern Lebanon was a trap, that they could not defeat, destroy, and exile Hezbollah. And, it was like 4 weeks ago, they were saying, oh, yeah, we've destroyed 80% of the missiles. And Hezbollah keeps hitting Israel, northern Israel, central Israel every day with, upwards of 40, 50 missiles, rockets. It doesn't make sense.
So with that being said, what's going on in the Gaza Strip right now? Are they still doing their daily bombings?
Yeah, they're starving the people to death.
How are they still alive, Larry?
Well, they're hanging on. It takes a while to kill people by starvation. But they're dying. And Israel's committing a war crime. And the world's letting it happen.
So they're still continuing to bomb there?
Yeah. They've scaled back some of their military operations, but again, they've been continuing to suffer casualties there. Hamas has not disappeared. That's the thing people don't get. They are still very active, and Israel's struggling to get that under control.
Will they be able to at some point, or is it one of those things that you're never going to get?
No, I don't think they'll ever be able to get it fully under control. Again, they're trying to control it. They're trying to control the West Bank, and they're trying to deal with Lebanon. I think the real impetus to get a ceasefire with Lebanon is so that they can focus on West Bank and Gaza.
What about the Houthis? Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. Go ahead.
Yeah, no. I mean, the Houthis continue to do what the Houthis do. They launch occasional missiles and rockets into Israel, and they continue to prevent free maritime transit of the Red Sea. And the United States can't stop them.
So I was going to ask you, can they get a handle on that? The
Who?
United States. Can the United States?
We've had 15 months now. Or well, I take that back to 12 months. So we started in December. It's now November, 12 months later. Been unable to do it in 12 months. What's changed? We don't have any more we've pulled our aircraft carriers out of there, in part because we were worried about them getting hit with missiles. And can't rule out the possibility of Russia supplying the Houthis with some hypersonic surfaced ship missile that'll take out some of the aircraft carriers, sink them.
So I don't. You and I haven't spoken since the election. What do you
Mm-hmm.
think of some of Trump's cabinet picks? Because it seems to me they're very pro-Israel.
Yeah, terrible. Trump is betraying his base, the simplest way to put it. Trump ran as I'll get you out of needless wars. And yet people said, well, yeah, you're taking all this money from like Miriam Adelson. Now, reportedly, she was claiming that she was going to give 100 million, but all she did reportedly was pony up 30 million, not an inconsequential sum. And maybe some of Trump's announced appointments, Marco Rubio, very ardent pro-Israel Secretary of State. Michael Waltz, his national security advisor, very ardent pro-Israeli. Mike Huckabee, we talked about, ambassador to Israel. Pete Gates, the Secretary of Defense.
Is that Hegseth? Is that Pete Hegseth?
Pete Hegseth, not Gates. Gates was temporarily in as Attorney General. Gates was one who was not actually pro-Israeli, reflexively. And then you get farther down the food chain, the second tier people. There's not a single one that's coming in willing to suggest, you know what, the Israelis are a bunch of murdering thugs who are out of control, and we got to bring them under control. So they're going to continue to do what they want to do. It's worth noting. Do you know the name of the president that tried to ban the predecessor of AIPAC? The predecessor of AIPAC was called the Zionists of America, Zionist Organization of America, ZOA. Do you know the name of the president that tried to impose a ban on that organization?
Jimmy Carter?
John Fitzgerald Kennedy. They sent a letter to the ZOA 1 month before he was assassinated, where Robert F. Kennedy informed the ZOA that they'd have to register as a foreign agent. Interesting timing, isn't it? The only president to ever try to enforce a ban on the Zionist Organization of America, now AIPAC, wound up dead. Coincidence, I guess.
Do you think Trump at this point, I mean, he's always, preached about no wars, peace in the Middle East. I heard that on the campaign trail. Does he not care about his base anymore, in your opinion?
I am not privy to his brain. All I can say is if he betrays his base, he will regret it. And his presidency will be a disaster. And it will be his own doing. Because the American people are sick and tired of these wars and of having the children of the middle class and the lower class be the ones that pay the price in terms of broken bodies, amputated limbs, and broken minds. The suicide rate among veterans is off the charts. And yet it's the children of the wealthy. Don Jr., Eric Trump, Don Trump Jr. and Eric Trump Jr., they didn't sign up in the military. They didn't serve. Donald Trump's son, youngest son, he's not signed up in the military. None of the kids of these wealthy, entitled folks go serve the country this way, where they actually have to put their lives on the line as these people like Trump make the decisions to put them in harm's way. And I'm alarmed. I was encouraged by his choice of Tulsi Gabbard, even though she has been also very outspoken in support of Israel. But at least she understands that we can't keep going to war. But everybody else that's in the food chain, there's nobody in there with their foot on the brakes. And it would rely upon Trump having his foot on the brake, and I don't think he's strong enough to do it, despite everything he's gone through. You'd think he would have learned. So this is what's so alarming is on Sunday, his national security advisor, proposed national security advisor, Michael Waltz, was on Fox News Sunday, I believe. And when the question came up about Biden's policy and particularly Jake Sullivan, Waltz said, "We're hand in glove with Sullivan." Well, I think that's the last thing any Trump supporter expected to hear out of his mouth. You're hand in glove with what Biden's doing in Ukraine? You're hand in glove with what they're doing in Israel? We shouldn't have our hand in that glove at all, because that's a bloody, soaked glove.
I heard your interview that was posted yesterday in regards to Sebastian Gorka and your thoughts on him. And that guy, every interview he's always, you ask him one question and he just like bullies you.
Well, yeah, he tries. He makes these outlandish statements. Oh, Iran's the number one sponsor of terrorism in the world. No, it's not. Objectively, it's not. And because how do you measure the number one terrorist sponsor in the world? Well, that would be the people that give money to those who are killing the most civilians and for political purposes. That definition is the definition that was proffered by one Bibi Netanyahu 40 plus years ago during an interview with William F. Buckley on his public television channel. And Netanyahu correctly defined terrorism. That terrorism is the act of use of violence against civilians for political purposes. Short, sweet, to the point. Absolutely right. So when you look at which group, organizations, entities today are killing the most civilians for political purposes around the world, the one that stands at the top that's killed the most is Israel. Israel is a terrorist state by virtue of the definition proffered by Bibi Netanyahu, who ironically is currently the leader of that terrorist state in terms of how many civilians it's killing.
But yet, I watched his interview. Why would Trump bring him back?
Because Gorka likes to kiss Trump's behind. What can I tell you?
Yeah, his interview I saw with Ukraine, and he was talking about how he'd handle Russia.
Yeah, he's delusional. Good luck with that. Russia's not some yard boy that gets ordered around. Hey boy, get over here and shine my shoes. Putin ain't no shoe shine boy. Not at all. The Russians are militarily superior to the United States right now. The United States is in no condition or position to pressure or fight Israel.
What were your thoughts when that new hypersonic missile was unveiled from Russia?
It was as momentous an event as the unveiling of the atomic bomb on August 6th, 1945. You know, on August 5th and August 4th, 1945, when a plane took off and dropped the bomb, they knew what to expect. They knew that that bomb would come out, and like other conventional bombs, it would blow up a particular area, but not cause mass casualties, mass incineration. All that changed on August 6th. The atomic bomb was a game changer and brought the world into a new type of environment. What Putin unveiled last Thursday, what the Russians unveiled, is a kind of weapon that we've never seen before. Yeah, it's derivative of existing missile technology in both MERV and MARV, MARV. MERV stands for multiple independent targeted reentry vehicles, or independently targeted reentry vehicles. So it means warheads that one warhead would contain smaller warheads, and they could be independently targeted when they were released. MARV refers to a maneuverable reentry vehicle. So you've got those multiple warheads, but then they could also, each one of those could be steered specifically. Then on top of it, it was hypersonic. But most importantly, that this was not nuclear. The impact by these projectiles traveling in excess of Mach 10 caused enormous destruction. And people say, well, how could that be? Well, several million years ago, an asteroid impacted on the surface of the Earth, basically created the Gulf of Mexico. And reportedly, that event is what killed all the dinosaurs, wiped out a lot of life on Earth. Life sort of started over after that. That's what this missile sort of like, miniaturized, a miniature version of an asteroid hitting the Earth. Because when it's these multiple warheads that hit, and they can carry explosives, but the interesting thing about them, one, they're precise, they can hit with great accuracy. Two, they travel at such a speed that there's no air defense system in the West that can shoot them down and stop them. Three, it can hit, this system now can hit any city in Europe or any military base in Europe, and nobody in Europe can stop it. So that's a game changer. The reports, eyewitness reports from the ground, is that plant, the Yuzhmash plant, which a lot of its factory workspaces were underground, buried underground, were completely destroyed, demolished, turned to dust. So if that's the case, what Putin unveiled was a game changer in terms of a weapon, because in the past, if you wanted to destroy a plant like that, you'd have to use a tactical nuke. Well, once you use the tactical nuke, number one, you've run the risk that the area is going to be covered with radiation, could remain radioactive for a while, that radiation could spread and cause collateral damage among innocent civilian populations, that the blast from a tactical nuke would still cause significant collateral damage to civilians and other targets. The fireball would ignite, consume anything nearby. The hurricane force winds would cause destruction. All of that's now avoided. So you get sort of I call it the bang that you would with a tactical nuke in terms of the ability to destroy a particular site, without the fallout, without the radiation, without the loss of control. So that's why it was important.
How did U.S. intelligence? How are they not aware of what they were working on?
Well, they may have been aware. I really don't know what the U.S. assessments were, and it's very possible that they were aware. They tried to warn both the Biden administration and the Secretary of Defense, Lloyd Austin, Department of Defense, and that the warnings were not heeded. They were ignored. Well, that wouldn't be the first time that has ever happened.
Why do this? Why escalate this now when you've got a lame duck administration that's getting ready to exit?
Create as much havoc as possible. Try to undermine Trump. Don't let Trump come in where he can immediately take credit for bringing the war to an end in 24 hours, as he claimed, because that's going to be the first line of attack. Trump's going to come in, and he's going to have to admit, no, I can't end this in 24 hours. So sorry, it's not going to happen. See, Trump's a liar. I can hear it already. And Trump did it to himself. He foolishly made that promise, and it's one of those he can't deliver on.
Are you surprised that you're not hearing much on this right now from him? Should he be more vocal publicly?
Yeah, he should. No, he should be very vocal on this, speaking out, saying, "Hey, this has got to stop. Stop the attackums. Stop launching these attacks into Russia. We need to find a way to work with Russia, to talk to Russia, not to go to war with Russia." And we're really living on a knife's edge. The Russian nuclear force is at its highest alert level since the Cuban Missile Crisis in 1962. U.S. forces are also on high alert. Russia has started distributing fallout shelters, mobile fallout shelters, and placing them around the country. The vice admiral in charge of Strategic Forces Command, or one of the deputy commander in that outfit, Buchanan, the other day talked about the United States fighting and winning a nuclear war against Russia. Russians are paying attention to that. They understand how dangerous that is.
What is your level of concern right now with this?
Very high. Yeah, I think this is a more dangerous time than we had during the Cuban Missile Crisis, in my view.
Yeah, and what about the rest of other countries in NATO? I mean, France.
They're talking about doubling down. They're talking about sending troops to Ukraine to fight. If they do that, they're going to be killed. And that may be what it takes to get a bunch of Frenchmen and Englishmen killed in a futile gesture. Maybe then they'll go, we ought to seek peace. But see, anybody that talks about seeking a peace agreement with Russia is accused immediately of succumbing to giving in to a dictator, letting Putin win. You can't have that. Can't let Putin win. This is also personalized. And what's crazy about it is Putin is not the authoritarian and not guilty of the kinds of abuses that were common under his communist predecessors, like Yuri Andropov, Chernenko, Brezhnev. And yet the West is treating him like he was worse than Stalin. It's crazy. It's absolutely insane.
Why is he so quiet right now in regards to all this? That baffles me.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't have any good answer.
So do you expect a peaceful, as I had Martin Armstrong on earlier, and I asked him what I'm about to ask you, do you expect a peaceful transition?
Anything that the Democrats can do to throw a wrench into it, they will do. And that may be part of the effort of Biden in trying to provoke a war with Russia, or maybe even provoke a war with Iran, in order to create a state of emergency that would be impossible for Trump to take office. That could happen.
Who's making the decisions right now in the Biden administration, in your opinion? Can't be him.
No idea. I have literally no idea. I don't think any. That's the question everybody in the world's asking. Who the hell is making decisions? Who's in charge? Who's driving the car? And there's nobody driving the car.
Who's got the football?
Yeah. Well, the Secret Service agent carries a football. The question is, you know, is Biden even aware of what he's carrying, and does he even know how to use it?
Well, the other thing is too, don't you think as this escalates, would some high brass in the military step in, or I mean, is there some way to invoke some type of?
Yeah, well, there's a way to invoke the 25th Amendment and remove him from office, but nobody's cared to do that yet. And relying on the hope that somebody at the Pentagon's going to step up and try to interfere with presidential prerogative, forget about that. That's not going to happen. Or it would only happen if Trump was in office.
And we still have. I mean, January 20th can't come soon enough. But to your point, what's it going to be like when Trump takes off, if he takes office, which it seems like he will? But you know, what will the state of Russia, Ukraine, and the Middle East be by then?
Worse than what it is now. I mean, so um, it will become readily apparent to the Trump folks that they are not in control. They have limited control over the events. I mean, to take Sebastian Gorka's remarks at all, we're going to tell Putin what he has to do, and if he doesn't do it, uh, then we're going to really open up the floodgates of aid to Ukraine. With what? What do you have left to give? There's not more Patriots, not more HIMARS. It's not like the Biden administration is sitting on a ton of materiel that they could give and aren't giving it. They don't have it. The United States can no longer make it. Just the other day, the admiral that's in charge of Indo-PACOM, the U.S. Pacific Command, uh, that he said, look, all these demands in Ukraine are depleting our inventory. We don't have enough missiles to do our mission here. So they're going to come to grips with that. I was just seeing flashing across my screen. The Biden announces that Israel Hezbollah ceasefire. Again, we've not heard anything from Hezbollah, but that's the spin that's going to come out of the White House. White House is going to take a victory lap. Woohoo! We got a ceasefire. Meanwhile, Hezbollah is not going to retreat. They're not going to withdraw to north of the Litani line. So I'm not sure what this, all the ceasefire buys is a chance for Israel to get its ass out of Lebanon and try to save some of its troops. But I don't see this, the notion that they're going to deploy the Lebanese army. Lebanese army is a joke. Lebanese army doesn't have any kind of military power to quash, quell, or control Hezbollah.
What are going to Trump's cabinet here for a second? I've said, Gates obviously dropped out. Kennedy, we'll see if he gets in, if he gets confirmed. But, you're seeing people still celebrating the election, and they're like, yeah, Gates would have taken down the FBI, the CIA, and Kennedy's going to take down Big Pharma. And it doesn't work like that, right, Larry? Like the CIA is not going to let you just take it down.
Well, we're going to fight. I think Tulsi Gabbard is an inspired choice. She'd be great for DNI, but the deep state's going to fight her like hell because she would be effective. I thought Gates was a stupid choice, very foolish, because there was just too much baggage there. The reason they got him out of the House was to avoid dealing with that ethics committee report, recognizing that could have just saddled the Republicans with something that would prevent them from pursuing their actual agenda. So, it was a silly choice by Trump. Now, I think they're going to run into the same issues with Hegseth at DOD. We shall see.
You
don't
think he'll?
It is all. This is all, pre-game warm up. We got to see what he does come January 20th. After he takes office. Is he going to buckle down and do what he promised to do or not? He's got a lot of promises to fulfill. We'll see if he delivers on them.
What do you think, Larry?
I think he's going to flop. I think he's going to get trapped. Um, he's going to be incapable of dealing with the world as it is. He'll have some success. I think he'll have success shutting down the border. I think he'll have some success getting cooperation out of Canada and Mexico, but that'll be about the extent of it. He's not going to have success in Europe. And he's certainly not going to have success with Ukraine and Russia.
You don't think him and Putin, there'll be some type of dialogue that'll be able to?
No. They've all Trump is still hamstrung, his hands tied, because he's always under that suspicion that he's a Russian agent. That hasn't gone away. They've continued to play that. Yeah, it would be ideal for Trump to talk to Putin and to negotiate it out, but they're not going to do that. And particularly, you don't allow people like Sebastian Gorka to go out and call Putin a murderous thug and tell him that we're going to bring him to heel. He's going to do what we want or else. This is not seventh grade. You don't get to make these kinds of stupid threats, and particularly against somebody of the stature of Vladimir Putin in Russia. So,
and to do that in a public forum too, in the media.
Yeah, I mean, it's just, it's just for ego, feeding his own ego, which is, the last thing you need in a position. Gorka is someone like Gorka who's only concerned about, building up his own ego, making himself look like he's an important guy.
Was he like that the first go around?
Sure.
I didn't pay attention like I do today, so I don't remember.
Well, yeah, let's remember all of his major accomplishments. Oh, there weren't any.
And then the Middle East, as we've talked about already, that doesn't seem like that's going to be dialed back when Trump takes office. If anything, it's going to be full throttle.
Yeah. Again, I will reserve final judgment on Trump until I see what happens in the first month. I'd be happy to be surprised that he comes right out of the blocks, that they pardon the January 6th prisoners. He's already indicated they're going to do that on a case-by-case basis. He's not going to issue a blanket pardon, which is unfortunate. He should issue a blanket pardon. Whether he's going to actually shut down the border and stop this flood of refugees, whether he's going to actually bring criminal charges against someone like Mayorkas for having facilitated the movement of all these illegal immigrants into this country, whether he'll release, despite his promise to release the JFK files, I doubt if he will.
Yeah, I've gotten to a point where, my expectations are so low for this. What I think is interesting is how people still believe it's a cult, or it is a cult on the MAGA side, and that he's just going to come in and fix everything. And, this is all over and we're winning. Even the way the election went, Larry, it just seemed too easy to me.
Yeah. Well, I think part of that happened because Trump intervened early on with the RNC, got them on board with his daughter-in-law there, and put some people in that are actually knew how to run a ground game. That was number one. And he correctly harnessed the power of social media. But there are reports that, he cut a deal with Biden, or Biden cut a deal with him. So even though Biden's trying to sabotage him right now, there's still maybe a foundation of maybe Biden's aggressive policy towards Ukraine is being done with Trump's full approval. And it's being done with Trump's full approval, and Trump promising Biden, I'll pardon you, but here's what you got to do. Heat things up with Ukraine so we can try to force Russia's hand. Could be that.
Do you think there's going to be justice even from Russiagate, as far as back as that, Fauci?
I would like to see it, but I not holding my breath.
Yeah, I still hear people. I hear people now. They're like, "Oh, justice, 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 it's coming." And I get, people say you're so pessimistic. You're so. I'm like, well, what do I have to go off of? Nothing
Well, let's
happens.
yeah, let's go back. Trump had the files on Russiagate that were declassified, and he didn't release them. In fact, those files were used against him in Jack Smith's case, which has now been tossed. You know, he should have released them. I said, Trump's good at talking, not always good at acting.
Is this what you thought would occur? As
I was more hopeful, optimistic, in light of him choosing J.D. Vance, that I thought we would get a little more sanity. Instead, he's putting in the same kind of people that got him into trouble in the first place. And it's okay. That's his choice. He's going to have to live with it. Shame on him.
where can people find you, Larry?
I'm at sonar21.com. SONAR21.com. That you can get to Patreon, Substack, all the places that you can contribute to support my blog there. And I'm always welcome for help.
So how are we feeling as we're coming into Thanksgiving of the state of the world? Or how are you feeling? Nobody cares how I'm feeling. How are you feeling, Larry?
Well, uneasy. It's a very dangerous time. And as I said at the outset, no one's driving the car. It's one thing, when you're going down a mountain road and there's nobody at the wheel, you're going to be carried along by gravity more often than not. And gravity is a merciless teacher. And we may be on a collision course that would be avoidable if somebody was in charge, but we don't have anybody in charge.
Is your level of concern higher than it's been? I mean, you and I have been speaking for a few years now. Where is it at?
Yeah. No, that's much higher than it's ever been. There's so many. This is like playing that game of Jenga. When you're pulling out the pieces of wood on a tower. This is towards the end of the game where you know that if you just pull out one more, the tower is going to collapse. That's where we are.
Who would you say has a higher level of risk right now? The United States or Europe, or is it equal?
Europe and Israel, Iran. What's going on there?
Why won't they release JFK's assassination? Do you think?
Why?
Yeah, after all these years.
Well, there's only two reasons. Either you've got a source. It would reveal CIA involvement. That's not. There are three reasons. If the documents that are held back revealed a very sensitive CIA source that was still in place, or revealed sources and methods for how intelligence was collected, that may be one reason, but that's not the reason. The second reason would be because it directly implicates CIA. Or the third reason is because it implicates a country that's close to the United States. There are, Tucker Carlson recently put up a video where he spoke to someone who had seen the files, and that person said it's not the country that you expect. But the country a lot of people expected was Cuba, maybe Soviet Union, but the circumstantial evidence, I believe, points to Israel. Makes a lot of sense. Number one, John F. Kennedy was directing and pushing for an inspection of Israel to verify that they had the atomic bomb, because Israel had stolen uranium from a plant in Pennsylvania, using a Jewish owner of that plant who had been involved with running arms to Israel during World War II and in the immediate aftermath of World War II. In ordering that, John F. Kennedy was going to try to shut down Iran's nuclear program. As I mentioned earlier, Robert F. Kennedy was directed and was pursuing efforts to shut down the Zionist Organization of America for its lobbying activities. Number three, Robert F. Kennedy was aggressively pursuing legal action against not only the Italian mob, but against the Jewish mob, people like Meyer Lansky and others. That's why it's not surprising that the one who shut up Lee Harvey Oswald was none other than Jacob Rubenstein, happened to be known as Jack Ruby. Ruby, who was Jewish, and later in his testimony before the Warren Commission report made a big deal about trying to protect the Jewish people from, uncovering their role, as he called it, in this assassination. He had connections with the Italian mob, specifically Carlos Marcello, the Italian mob boss in New Orleans, where a lot of Lee Harvey Oswald's activities were. So coincidence? It's worth investigating. So I think that's one of the things that's being held back. It doesn't necessarily mean that Israel did it. It doesn't necessarily mean that there were Israeli hitmen that were involved. But it's one of the reasons that they're holding it back, just so that even those questions can't be answered or asked.
Larry, as always. Oh, last question. Any good movies you see lately or on the horizon?
Nope, I've been so consumed with just trying to keep track on social media what's unfolding in Israel, Palestine, and Ukraine. That's where my focus has been.
This weekend, we won't break away and watch something?
Nope. Got to keep working. The world events aren't going to they're not taking a vacation.
As always, thanks for doing this. Have a happy Thanksgiving, and I'm sure it won't be that long before we speak again.
Okay, thank you, Mike. Bye.
Mic drop.